Okay, the title for this unit of the course is called the Digital Web, and so we're going to take a kind of overview of the different digital history projects that have appeared in the last 15 years. And so for this unit, I want you to start by reading Rosenzweig's chapter on exploring the history web here. And you see he basically sets out three themes that he's going to examine: the development of historical websites, the advantages of putting that material on the web, and of course, one of the big advantages of doing that is accessibility. Most of the materials aren't accessible to the general public, but putting the stuff on the web makes it accessible. Um, he also talks a little bit about the actual process of translating historical materials to the web. Um, on one hand, it can be rather simple, just a matter of scanning a document, making a PDF of it, and putting that on the web. But as you get into more complex materials and everything, the whole process, of course, becomes more complex and complicated on how you're actually going to do it and everything. And for example, one of the materials that I work with a lot of time are slides, 35 millimeter slides. And so for that, you first have to have some sort of slide scanner that you can digitize the slides. You have to decide what size you want the final image to be, because as you try and blow up a slide too far, you'll lose sharpness and focus and everything. So you have to make that decision, and then you have to decide in what sort of image format are you going to put it on the web, or are you going to compress it or not compress it and everything. So there's a bunch of different questions that get involved as you translate materials onto the web and everything. And then the last thing Rosenzweig talks about in his chapter is the genre of historical websites. And basically what that means is the different kinds of forms that websites can take when they're put on the web. And so if we go, after you've read that, and we go back to the syllabus, you'll see I have some short notes on evaluating websites because it's one of um, the assignments that I use in my online courses for students to evaluate specific websites and everything. But you'll see I've given you a list of, it's not really a random list, but it's kind of a pretty good list of the kinds of projects that have been put on the web in the last 15 years, from the very beginning to the more recent things. And I want you to click through them and take a look at all these different digital history projects. And one of the things I want you to do is try and put them in chronological order. And by looking at the forms that the sites take and the kind of materials that are on the sites, I think you'll be able to do that, going from the simple to the more complex and the more recent. You'll also see, and as what I've just alluded to, you'll see that over the last 15 years, the forms of digital websites and history materials on the web have has really changed dramatically. Um, and so, for example, looking at the Avalon project, which is a relatively early project that appeared on the web, it's basically putting historic diplomatic documents, digitizing them, and putting them on the web. There's not a whole lot of fancy imagery. There's not a whole lot of fancy website design. I mean, basically, what you have is a website full of documents. As you get to the more recent online web projects, and I'm not going to point out any specific ones here, you'll see that the more recent projects have a lot more interactivity built into them. They have a lot more graphics on the websites. The websites themselves are more complicated. The way they're set up and formatted, they could be coded using PHP as opposed to simple HTML. They could have embedded Flash or movie objects and everything. And so the whole kind of design of sites has really dramatically changed over time. So you take a look at these, and these are all pretty good sites, pretty well respected by historians, and have a look at the kind of components in each of them, and get an idea of what you think the purpose in the author's or the author's intent was in creating these sites, and then try and assess whether the author was good or not good in meeting that purpose and achieving his aim and everything. And then I was going to say something else here about these sites, um, but I can't think of that right now and everything. The last sites I have there at the bottom by Jeff Gates aren't really like websites per se. They're really built on the blog, and we're going to be talking a lot about blogs and the multi-uses that you can make of blogs in the course and everything. And so those sites by Gates are a little different, and so I take a little kind of closer look at what he's done with that when he created those sites and everything. And so in essence, then this is kind of your intro to the actual digital web. We've looked at the digital centers in the last unit, and the digital centers where they work on creating materials for the web. Well, these are some of the projects that digital centers and individuals have created over the last 15 years. And so you get kind of an overview of just some of them. And as we get through the course, we'll be looking at more and more sites, and we'll look at them in different kinds of detail and ways of examining them.